Videology recently worked with Forrester to examine the latest trends in video and TV convergence and find out how advertisers, agencies, and media companies are responding. Both media buyers and sellers are struggling to solve the challenges posed by shifting viewing habits, and there's more to come. Over the next 3 years, 73% of buyers and sellers predict an increase in the consumption of full-length shows online. 79% predict more time will be spent watching smart TVs, and 77% predict an increase in smartphone video viewing. But traditional TV isn't going anywhere. In fact, it's thriving. In 2013, 22% of buyers and sellers thought time spent watching traditional TV would increase. But today, 3 years later, almost half believe time spent watching traditional TV will grow. When it comes to screens, it's not about either or, it's about more. In response to these trends, Forrester found that agencies, advertisers, and media companies are increasingly embracing new video options and the technology needed to power them. Today, 72% of buyers and sellers expect that video buying will become more programmatic. 71% also think advertisers will shift dollars from linear TV to digital channels in the coming years. In comparison, in 2013, only 65% predicted the shift would happen. Additionally, more than 3/4 of buyers and sellers believe technology will be a crucial component for success, up from the 66% who thought so in 2013. Despite this astronomical growth, the survey also uncovered some challenges that may be holding back video and TV advertising. For online video, respondents said the biggest challenges were managing multiple technologies, understanding cross-platform viewing behavior, and measuring campaign performance. In fact, 1/3 say measurement concerns are actually holding back their video spend. For TV, the biggest challenges cited were customer targeting, managing diverse data sources, and holistically tying together linear and digital video buys. Additionally, concerns around ad fraud and viewability were huge. About half of both advertisers and agencies said fears about ad fraud were constraining their video spend. So what can agencies, advertisers, and publishers do to optimize results from their TV and video investments? Work with partners who have advanced fraud and viewability controls in place to prevent loss of human views. Seek technology partners who can tie together data and measurement across screens and across media types. Remember that when it comes to video, it's all about ROI. It's crucial to prove performance of a marketer's campaign against their chosen KPIs. And finally, keep in mind that consumers today aren't choosing one screen over another. They are increasing viewing across all screens. A converged advertising approach has become critical to ensure that brands are reaching their target audience, whenever and wherever they are watching. Looking ahead, how will these trends continue to change? We'll be watching.
Great, and a wonderful setup for sure, Scott. So if you guys can make your way up here. Let me kind of dive right in. The slides we just saw and the slide behind us is talking about the fact that, at least in terms of the research that Forrester conducted, 71% of the buyers and sellers say that it will merge, that it will come together. We've got a good cross-section up here in terms of people, buyers, sellers, agency partners, measurement company. It doesn't get better in terms of people who can speak to this topic. Ben, let me start with you. Do you think that's true in your role at MasterCard, and obviously your experience on both agency side and client side uniquely qualifies you?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is people think of, media is not a binary, it's not a set of binary solutions, and we have to kind of figure out how they all sort of fuse together. And I think video is, that's more commonplace in video than anywhere else. I mean, it's not going to be, consumers don't understand what they're, they understand. They don't appreciate the difference from a material marketing standpoint, what they consume on whatever one of those screens. They have different roles and functions, but we got to figure out how to kind of mash them all together because, we have to figure out how to orchestrate all that to be able to drive our performance.
Doug, last year, you were quoted somewhere, maybe it was one of the meetings we were in together in the tsunami of the last 15, 18 months, but talking about cable particularly being ripe for programmatic. And again, I think we should level set. At MediaLink, we define programmatic as pretty straightforward, as media buying with better data in an automated fashion. It's not much more confusing than that from a definition. Maybe at Denso Aegis you have a different one, but I think it's probably similar. But kind of background, why did you feel cable was any more ready than linear television? Or maybe you didn't make that distinction.
Yeah, no, I think I did make that distinction. And I think that there's a real opportunity in the sense that we've got limited people resources at agencies. And so what we need to look to do is how do we deploy those people resources in the most effective way? And our clients are still looking for...
It's a good thing you said limited people resources as opposed to limited people.
That's right, yes. But we want to make sure that we're appointing those people resources in the right way to create the biggest opportunities for our clients, to create the biggest return. And when we look at what's happening with the fragmentation around video, we've got buyers and activation experts now that are spending an enormous amount of time with a very long tail of media suppliers and media providers that are out there. And so we've got to look at, and those media suppliers and media partners have very small ratings. And when you look at some of the measurement that's out there, it would indicate that in fact that the measurement of those very small long tail cable networks are more wrong than they're right. So what we need to look at is how do we take those audiences, because there still are important audiences watching those long tail shows, but how do we actually do that in a much more efficient and effective way, and moving to automation and being able to leverage data to be able to reach those audiences with scale, not necessarily one network by one network, but actually an audience across multiple networks. That's why we feel that it's ripe for the opportunity for programmatic.
Doug, you used the word, the people in charge of activation. Is that a code word for investment? Is that a new view of the investment capability? Or is there a separate group, or is there a separate discipline that talks about I'm curious.
Yeah, no, so for us, we actually, we have buyers, and I think we've moved from a language of calling them investment managers or buyers, because I think that limits what they need to be thinking about and what they need to be doing. It's not just about negotiating dollars. That is absolutely critical in making sure that we're getting the best value for our clients. But value is shifting from just extracting cost from the marketplace, because I think we've done a pretty good job over the years of pushing prices to a point where there's probably not a whole lot more value that you're going to be able to extract, and actually shifting that conversation into a performance conversation and really looking at what's the opportunity to drive top-line sales or ROI from those engagements. So we do make the distinction, and now we have activation managers in our agency that are thinking about the tactical planning, the implementational planning aspects of what we're doing, so that our planners are moving more upstream to a strategic level, that they're thinking across screen, they're thinking across device, they're thinking multi-channel.
Great, and thank you, because the nuance was important between the two. Eric, kind of a general question, but a loaded question. So if this merger is going to take place based on 71%, a pretty strong sample, your role, you're the guy with the yardstick. I don't know, I'm sorry. At this conference, I shouldn't say that. No. Told you, Scott. It's dangerous to let me up here with a microphone.
Thank you, though.
Any questions?
Good night.
That measurement, critical, obviously. Not new that it's critical, but how are you seeing your role change in the dialogue between marketer, agency, and publisher?
Yeah, I think it's an extension of the conversation we've had the last several years, which is we need to be able to capture the viewership across all viewership modes and devices and make sure that that's reflected in our metrics. we're our total audience framework and our total audience measurement products in particular that are launching this year should take us a long way toward being able to solve for this. So you'll be able to, on a campaign basis, look at your campaign delivery across TV and various digital channels. Maybe more importantly, because that's something that's been in the marketplace for a while, you will also be able to see
The OCR,
Right,
what we used to refer to. Is there a different?
that's our total ad ratings product.
Right.
And then we're also launching our total content ratings product, which is the ability to look at audience consumption of content. So TV shows, websites, apps, et cetera, across the various devices on which they're consumed. So sort of for the first time, you'll have cross-platform representative and comparable metrics that you can use as a starting point for what are consumers doing, what's consumer behavior, and then also be able to measure on the back end what was the campaign delivery against it.
So Eric, we at MediaLink were fortunate several years ago to work with the 4As, the IAB, and the ANA when they were actually all still talking to one another. Just kidding. Actually, I'm not. On the 3Ms, on the Making Measurement Make Sense initiative, MediaLink and Bain Consulting, obviously work together very much hand in glove on that. Is that the outgrowth of all of that work? Because you guys were actively involved with us back then in terms of that delivery. Are we at a point where we have it?
I like to think we're getting close to it. There are some elements of the 3MS initiative that we're also looking to incorporate, things like embedded viewability and things like that. But we have those capabilities, and I think that initiative that started a few years ago is starting to come to fruition now. Yeah.
Great. Another fact that was talked about in the slide presentation earlier, or in the video, was the fact that in the Forrester research, again, the numbers speak for themselves, there was a view that in 2013 we had one set of facts, in 2015 another set of facts. Kern, are you surprised at those numbers in terms of people saying linear TV viewing will increase?
No, I don't, excuse me, I don't think I'm surprised at these numbers. It is increasing. We think in a lot of ways, not just across devices and platforms, but inside linear TV itself. We think that there's, for TV the art form, as opposed to just TV the platform, this is
For
the best.
TV the art form?
TV the art form, as opposed to TV the platform. We think this is the best, some of the best days we've ever seen. More great programming, more great places to watch it, and that's just beginning. So for Viacom as a publisher, we see bright days ahead. It's easy to think even beyond the organic growth through evolution of storytelling and some of the new platforms that are out there. I think we're really optimistic about some of the mid-range opportunities that are going to be presented. It sounds far-fetched maybe, but we're looking at self-driving cars as a real boon to the storytelling industry. Most Americans in 18 and over are going to recapture 30, 40 minutes a day, maybe over an hour, and our data suggests that a lot of that's going to go to content consumption. So we think that there are a lot of factors beyond just the ongoing investment in content that are going to move to more engagement and more time spent with rich experiences being delivered across a bunch of platforms.
The distinction, though, and you made it, the art form versus the platform, I don't think there's any dispute that these numbers are accurate in terms of content consumption. I'll speak for myself. I bet I'm in the minority, but certainly I'm rather in the majority, actually, not in the minority. I consume way more content than I've consumed ever in my life, but I don't watch it on what I would traditionally have defined as linear television. I'm watching it, but it's nowhere near a growth in my viewing linear television on the wall. So
there's a bunch of stuff wrapped up in that, and I tend to agree with Scott's comments at the beginning of this that we need to be a little bit more fluid in our definition. I think the recent FCC decision is telling us that, right? And you start to ask yourself, from a consumer perspective, I don't think they care about the protocol through which these packets are being delivered to their home. And as we move into a more dynamic ecosystem, I do believe that screen size matters. I was going to give you a little size matters joke in this, but I feel like that's going to be your territory. But we do believe.
I think we already established that.
We've already been there. So I don't
35-year friendship with Dr. Ruth
That's right.
indicated that size matters. It's okay.
But we do think that there are certain kinds of experiences where size and location in the home matters, and co-viewing matters. And there are experiences that people want to have together in their living room. Again, my apologies. And there are other experiences that might be more individual on a laptop, smartphone, on the go. So I think, all of this, though, feels like TV to us. And what is linear? It's not going to be too long before we're looking at an on-demand world.
Seriously, couldn't we look at the title? Full frontal video.
Yeah.
Again, I think we'd all be better served never to use the word TV again, use the word video, and then we lose the confusion because, again, as I told my friends at AMC a long time ago, hey, love Breaking Bad, love Mad Men, never watched one episode except the finale in both cases on that thing on the wall.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to take up too much time because I'm sure a lot of people want to talk about this, but the one point I would make about that is just that we do believe at Viacom there's still a way to talk about video that's not all inclusive, right? There's high quality, medium to long form content that really drives rich and deep engagement. And there's some other stuff that also happens to have sight, sound, and motion that creates a different experience for the folks on the other side of the screen. And so we haven't come up with the vocabulary yet, but I do still think that there's a distinction.
Michael, I want to make 2 points on this because I think it's important. One is you talked about screen size, and some of the data that we're seeing now is that with the rise of things like OTT and connected television sets, we're actually seeing that the consumers that were watching high-quality content on mobile devices is shifting that viewing back over into the wall because it is about having the access and the demand to connect with that content when they want to, but they actually want that content in a larger screen, right? So we're seeing that. That's not going to replace mobile devices. That's critically important. The second point I want to make is we've just completed some research with about 40 different brands, and what we've seen is that digital video actually delivers about a 50% higher ROI than traditional TV. However, there's a maximum amount of digital video that actually we can leverage. So we're finding about 20 to 30% of dollars should be spent in digital video to maximize the return.
But you hit a ceiling at some point.
You're going to hit a ceiling in terms of the ability to deliver unduplicated reach. And that's really what we're looking for, is to deduplicate that reach between those platforms to hit as many consumers as we can. And traditional TV is still vibrant, it's still important, it still drives volume response. It may not always be the highest ROI, but it's the highest contributor oftentimes of sales.
It's hard to get unduplicated reach with TV because the reach of TV is so great. So
I also think that as we start thinking about, different screens have different purposes, right? There are very few, there are some, but very few advertisers are putting the same message on their mobile phone. Yeah, there's some, but putting it on their mobile phone that are putting it on, a cinema screen or an out-of-home board. Forget the 60-inch screen that you have in your home. And I think that that's the part of the challenge of figuring out how to orchestrate them all together. We all have different challenges. Again, like most marketers, if you sit there and say, is my objective to drive my brand or drive my business? Inevitably, it's yes. It's a little bit like riding two horses with the same rear end, but that's the reality of what we have to deal with today.
Yeah.
We have to do both, and I think that that's the role of some of the different forms of video are more apt to
and I
be
think
used
that's
in
so
some.
critical, is we have to have the agencies and the clients need to be asking the question about what is the role of video, what are we trying to accomplish, because there is a way to make traditional TV has a role to play. It will continue to have a role to play, but we need to migrate some of those dollars into digital video against the same role that TV's always played. But as you point out, digital video in and of itself has different measurement and then a different role and therefore different measurement.
Absolutely.
And actually, just one last thing, one word of caution here is let's remember that while the technology is very impressive and we're all sitting here in New York City and everybody has every device and everything, there are still 10% of homes in the U.S. that are over the air only. So they get their television through broadcast, and number one. And number two, delivering large sort of broadcasts over the internet still isn't quite there in terms of the user experience. You see with the Super Bowl, the Grammys, et cetera, they all have trouble delivering that. So We're not quite there yet in all of video being able to be delivered over the internet backbone.
No question about it. Let's move on. There was an interesting three-way split in this research in terms of sort of the players around the table in the various constituencies, agencies, marketers, and publishers. 54% of the agencies, Doug, said interactivity is the key driver. 50% of the advertisers kind of lined up. I mean, everybody's kind of at 50 to 60% in terms of what they think are the key elements of success. You and I spent some time in a global run last year, and we had that particular marketer who said to them, the most important thing to focus on, as you will recall, was the creation, distribution, and monetization of content. I mean, I believe, just as as an aside, the letter T played a big role in the year 2015 in the tsunami, but also the reasons for all the disruption: technology, transparency, trust, and talent. So it seems like every word started with a T, except the word content. What do you think
So
of
I
these
think,
statistics?
first of all, I would agree with all of these. I wouldn't put myself into just the advertiser, because I think it comes back to what Ben said, which is, what's the role of video, right? Because I think all of these are right, depending upon where you're coming from. So yeah, absolutely, digital video can help us extend reach if that's what we're trying to accomplish. But at the same time, if we're trying to actually change perception, ingrained perception, well beyond a 10-second or a 3-second or a 15
Perception of the brand or perception of the
perception
commercial
of the
interruption?
brand. So again, let's figure out what the barrier is that we're trying to overcome, and therefore what the role is of video, because a long-form piece of content is absolutely going to be about deep engagement and potentially interactivity if we want them to take an action or to do something. That's not going to be about top-of-mind awareness that we're trying to achieve for a well-known brand that we're just trying to get into the grocery cart on a weekly basis.
Great.
I also struggled, when I read this research, I also struggled between separating interactivity and engagement. They're the same. I mean, interactivity almost is an ingredient of engagement. I mean, I don't
It's a
separate
tactic.
them. You don't sit,
Exactly.
So I struggled with, not that I'm busting on the research, but I mean, I just struggled to think that how somebody would think those are kind of different things.
I actually looked at this and I thought, ultimately these are all proxies for the kinds of business outcomes that you were talking about. This is, have I moved my brand? Have I moved my business? Have I moved my product? We, I think, are increasingly at a place with big data, with partnerships between measurement companies and MasterCard data and all of these other syndicated sets, mobile location, where we can start to measure the outcome, short-term, medium-term, long-term, around brand perception, purchase lift, visitation, all of this stuff. And we ought to be working towards a marketplace that functions on impact rather than just some of these proxies. They're all good, but none of them are as good as the end outcome for the brand and the business.
And it's hard, right? It's not easy. And some businesses are easier than others. Ours is really complicated. We have a super complicated business model. We're making progress on figuring out, the end of the funnel, if you will. But it's not easy. So you have to build these proxies to kind of, to kind of sort of get you on the path.
Eric, do you see any different perspective, or do you think there's alignment because you transcend, you work with both sides of the equation? Do you see any difference, or do you see an alignment between kind of buyers and sellers on these metrics, and in terms of the desire to just maintain, and I'm sure the answer to this is no, the traditional metrics, or the new KPIs that are kind of being dictated by client and agency in their discussions with you and their discussions amongst themselves, kind of a show me attitude?
Yeah, there's a lot in there. I think when I look at these results, I sort of say, well, on the media owner side, they're looking at reach, and on the advertiser agency side, they're looking at impact, right? They're looking, did it move the needle on sales? And
the agency is looking at reach around. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, we can't get away from that topic.
Is there a drinking game? Yeah.
And-
How many
and I-
times we're going to be in a
And so I
That
think
was
from
easy. I'm sorry.
from the media owner's perspective, I think that's so. But this is like armchair psychology, by the way. This is sort of reading into these results. But you can sort of look at it and say, from media owner's standpoint, their goal has always been broad reach and creating that canvas really to drive awareness and top of funnel metrics. And that's what this kind of represents. That's what sort of traditional measurement and metrics allow you to do. On the agency advertiser side, they're starting to look for and ask more for what did that ad campaign deliver in terms of whatever the metric is, whatever your KPI is, ultimately sales. And there are plenty of media owners who are starting to work toward metrics that allow for buying and selling based on that. But it's nascent, and it's not yet a set of data that is as liquid and easily accessible as the traditional ratings data that have been available. So I think you're starting to see an evolution here, and a coming together of the traditional media activity around brand awareness and the traditional direct response type world around delivering ROI. And how they are starting to come together is I think we're starting to see a little bit of
The only
mix.
thing I'd take exception to is it's well past starting to come together. I mean, that traditional metric, it's way more about ROI than it's ever been in what we would have historically not referred to as direct response. But
And if I could add to that, I think that there's a perception maybe that we've solved for the currency, the common currency with something like OCR, which I think is great. It's a big step forward, but that is only good if the currency is GRPs. And that doesn't allow us to look at unduplicated reach. So I think when we start to look at, you've got traditional TV, you've got digital video, direct-to-publisher deals, and then you've got programmatic deals as well, not to get into things like OTT and those types of formats. You know, the challenge that we still have as an industry is the ability to unduplicate reach across those platforms. And that's something that I think that, you know, we need to be focused on solving for that, because we know with many, many campaigns and many, many clients that there is a correlation, and many times it's causal, between reach, awareness, and sales.
Well, you know, not to get in the way of one of my fellow panelists, but I think the ComScore Rentrak merger takes us a lot closer to an integrated single source measurement that could get us to total reach, unduplicated reach across close
At
to
the
20 million.
household level.
At the household level, but you know, they're getting close.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting close. I think it's a real opportunity to push the industry and to push measurement to connect the dots and get us closer to a converged measurement world.
Yeah, I would suggest that we are closer to delivering that. But I think the missing link, to go back to what Doug said, we'll fight out after. You got about 6 inches of reach on me. Speaking of reach and inches.
Don't do it, Michael. Don't do it.
What Doug was saying, I think, is true with our Nielsen campaign ratings products.
Mm-hmm.
I think are fantastic in terms of providing a comparability across TV and digital for that traditional marketing activity that's based on GRPs and reaching folks by age and gender. The next frontier for us is audience-based, right? When you're looking at doing things that are on a targeted audience basis, how do you measure it? Well, that's the next frontier for us, is to be able to make sure that our reporting also allows for reporting on delivery against audiences. And I think that's fair.
Moving to the next bit of the research, I think this is one of the more interesting slides that we've got in the Nothing Much Will Change, looking at the split between what publishers are saying and what agencies and marketers are saying. So this doesn't seem to have real alignment. If you have publishers at more than half and the other folks at less than half of that saying the same thing. I mean,
Well,
what do you think? You're the seller here.
I'm a member of the 48% that do think a lot's going to change. I think Viacom's in that 48%, and we're delighted to see that more than half of our competition is falling asleep at the wheel. So, good for us. I think it bodes well for the future of Viacom and other publishers who are not in that 52%, frankly.
Yeah. I think that what's going to change this is exactly what you were talking about, because I think we're going to solve for age and gender, traditional demographic. We've got OCR, moving that and similar kind of capabilities. We need to get to unduplicated reach against age and gender, but really, really what clients are much more focused on more and more today is audiences. And so, if you're selling a product that has nearly 100% household penetration, you still want huge reach numbers. But for many, many advertisers, their audiences are relatively small in terms of the number of people in the market at any given time purchasing that product, and therefore.
So you're drawing the distinction, Doug, because we hear this all the time. Well, that's good for CPG.
Yep.
But in the real world, because CPG has a vaunted position in the real world, based on what you just said.
Yeah, but I would even argue for CPG, and this is the tide is turning, because I think particularly as CPGs
It
are
was a
starting.
good Procter plug, by the way. The tide
Yes,
is
exactly.
turning.
Nice.
It wasn't lost on me. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. So, but looking at audiences, behavioral audiences around purchasing is really, really important. So lapsed users versus non-users gets, and the question then becomes, as we move to audience targeting, and the ability to deliver on that is now we shift into the messaging conversation. And this is really where I see our agency having much more of an impact on upstream conversations. Who are we targeting from a segmentation standpoint? And therefore, what is our ability to reach them? And from that standpoint, what should the message be in order to connect with those consumers?
And I think one of the benefits.
So you're getting to, one second, Ben, I'm sorry, but so when you say that, you're bringing addressability into the conversation in a
Absolutely.
very real fashion, which I want to come back to. But so that's what I presume you mean by that last piece.
That's right.
Okay. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, you also, in addition, obviously we have to talk about, we want to talk about unduplicated reach. And I think the benefit of the evolution of data and technology will be able to, audience measurement will help us get on the journey better. So all the things that we're doing around addressability and around audience targeting will just help us understand the journey better. We'll be able to understand in, closer to real time how many people need to be exposed to how many messages to behave, and this target needs a certain amount, and that target needs a certain, we'll just be more precise around the whole journey of being able to communicate with people, and that's ultimately what we're trying to, we'll be able to measure success around audiences and their journey, and then underneath that, we'll be able to do all of our, message delivery and message, creation underneath that.
Can I move to addressability, because I think it's such an important conversation. It's a word that's used and has been used for, as the holy grail for 15 years. I mean, remember sitting in 2000 with, InVidi and Visible World, and listening to forget the battles between them, listening to the promise of all of that. Is it here? Do we think it's going to make a difference? Or there's a bunch of questions here, so I'm going to throw them all out, and we can go back and drill down. Are advertisers prepared to pay premium for that addressable, advertising? And further, from a publisher standpoint, what's the potential for either lift or drag based on addressability? I mean, is it good news for a publisher? Bad news? Is it good news for a marketer? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, two compound questions, but Ben, you were gonna jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no question that addressability will only help us understand our audiences better and be more contextually relevant to the right audience. I think that one of the challenges today is the technology is there to be able to understand audiences better. The technology, generally speaking, is there, and you and all of your, not all of your peers, but you're all moving towards having addressable environments. One of the biggest challenges today is the message development. And again, there's no creative agencies on the panel, and don't know if there are any creative agencies out in the audience. The biggest gap today is the ability to create scale messaging. I mean, because you still have that, where do you draw that line between, having the big, huge, giant brand messages, which every CMO knows and loves, versus, you can't deliver those in a contextually relevant environment. If I go to all the energy to dissect my audience and figure out the best place to reach them and still show them the same message that everybody else gets, then I've just wasted all that time and energy. I mean, in the work that we've done, and again, we haven't hung the mission accomplished banner on the side of the building or anything, but in the work that we've done on really driving at targeting and then delivering unique messages, I mean, we found huge increases in impact. So, are we willing to pay a premium? Yeah, I mean, I think we're moving away from not that we're asking you to increase your rates or anything. But I mean, we're willing to pay because
I think that's what I heard.
And funny, I thought the addressability would be priceless.
Yeah.
That was right there on a platter for you. No, but I mean, if it's worth it, ultimately it will be if we can drive more value from driving contextually relevant messages to unique audiences, it's worth the premium because our experience tells us, it's got huge benefits.
Well,
One could argue, though,
Yeah.
Kern, before you answer that, one could argue that you may not actually be paying a premium. You may actually finally be paying fair value for what you set out to do, which is to read Doug Ray on a Tuesday when he's going shopping, and you want to make sure he's got the MasterCard in his pocket.
And it depends on, I'm sure Doug has the master. The whole set of other issues of Doug was about to whip it out and prove it. He doesn't need to do that. I think the difference is, and it's one of the other questions that you may get to is, are we still talking about measuring CPMs? Are we getting further down the funnel and doing cost per response, whether it's cost per engagement, cost per view, cost per whatever? I think that's kind of where the tipping point will be. If I change my metric, if I'm still looking at CPM, then it's a little bit like a Flintstones episode, but there are people that are still out there, 3 years from now, and I think you're going to find way fewer people who are just looking at that. So I think it kind of gets to the different metric.
Yeah.
Correct.
So I agree with everything you said. I think as a publisher, not only should you pay us more for addressable, but we believe in the impact of this and fine-tuning the medium. We are working to deliver addressability at scale. We're working in a complex ecosystem. Viacom is a publisher. We're not a distributor, right? But we are creating as many agreements as we can, as quickly as possible, with other advanced TV platforms like Roku, with whom we're an investor and a partner around addressable advertising solutions, like Hulu, where we're recapturing all of our inventory on the Hulu platform to deliver addressable ads and Viacom content, and like Snapchat that we just announced, where we think we can reach the next generation of TV viewers in a native platform. So we are really, really on the front foot in this case because it delivers greater value for our advertising partners. It relieves some of the scarcity that we have in supply of super premium video, and it drives better outcomes. So all of these things, this is a really, really positive movement.
And I think especially in video, the biggest, what's kind of the anchor, the anchor around our ankle, which is slowing us down, is we got to figure out how to create messages. And there's a lot of solutions out there. It's hard to get to that space.
I think we've been doing addressability for years, well before Innovid and Visible World and so on. It was called direct mail, right? And so and direct email then. But I spent a lot of time in that space where we were doing A/B copy testing or control, doing a direct mail campaign and then running radio or running television in a market and comparing that to a direct mail market that didn't have TV. And what we found is that addressability is really important for that, trying to convert the consumer. When you're really targeted with a targeted message, many times you need that broader message as well. And what we tend to find is that it lifts the response and the conversion rates when those things run together. So if I just think, last week for the Academy Awards, I'm going to use Cadillac as a quick example here. We had the Dare Greatly campaign. We had a lot of brand activity that was running, sponsoring the Academy Awards. That was great because Cadillac has a job to do to change ingrained perception, and you need big tentpole kind of events to borrow the equity of those to change them. We're also one of the biggest advertisers for General Motors in addressable TV because less than 2% of car buyers or people are in the market to buy a car at any given time. So you've got to think about those working together, and the messaging for that addressable Cadillac spot that ran in tandem with the big tentpole Academy Awards is a different piece of content that's running, but together they work.
It has to be.
It has to
Obviously,
be,
that's part of the promise, and as well as the hopeful, delivery. What I want to do, and again, I'm going to go a little off script here, but and if anybody thought this was scripted, they would be wrong based on just the conversation. But what do we see at the end of the day as what 2016 looks like? I mean, we came through a year of, again, not talking about just deck chairs on the Titanic, but we came through a year where there was so much disruption, so much change, so much noise in the media industry. You talked about the role of a planner, Doug, taking on a different role. There are those who think we're in a marketplace where we're going to see a new bundle, where we're going to see account planning and media planning coming back together in a new way. We saw that in some of the media reviews where creative agencies were all of a sudden again pitching media planning assignments. What do you think? I mean, that's got to be interesting for our audience. You'd have a very good perspective.
Yeah. So been in this business about 22 years, and I spent the first 15 years in integrated creative agencies. And even when the unbundling started to happen, I sort of dug my heels in because I really believed that media strategy and media planning was very connected into the content creation of that. That content creation has splintered quite a bit. You know, ad agencies are not creating all the content anymore. There's a lot of other content creation going on. But to get to your question, I think 2016, there's a couple things that are going to happen. One is that, and I'm going to look at this through the video lens. The first thing is we need to look at, you know, cross-screen in order to look at how we invest our clients' video dollars.
Or to your earlier point, how you activate.
Activating, right. So I do think that 20 to 30%, and that's roughly, but you know, if you're targeting a younger audience, it's going to be higher and so on. But 20 to 30% needs to be spent in digital video. We need to look at that in an integrated way. That's the first thing. The second thing is you cannot look at video in a vacuum because there is a direct correlation between video and search around a brand and video and social. And so what we need to get to is from a planning standpoint, a strategy standpoint, is to look at the stack of video plus search plus social. We've been doing that. That's really, really important. That's a strategic conversation that has to happen. The next point is when clients get that and they buy into that and they say, I can get more value by thinking in that way, the very next conversation is really about the content. Because many times, you know, if you think about 30% of your TV dollars in digital video, right, much of that digital video now is running on mobile devices, and we're moving to a world of vertical video. Traditional TV, horizontal 15-second units don't work in that environment. So that very next conversation that 2016 we need to solve for is helping clients create the appropriate content for the digital video space and the mobile video
So
space.
Snapchat sounds like a good bet there in terms of digital, you know, vertical
It's
video.
getting there. I'm not sure the scale is there yet, but certainly that's something we're looking at.
Ben, what would you say from a marketer perspective, and also having an agency background? So, you know, you've been on both sides of the table.
Yeah, my first instinct is 2016. You know, it's already, you know, it's hard to, it is moving around the aircraft carrier, right? It's hard to, you know, jump. If you said what happens in 3 to 5 years, I mean, I agree with everything that Doug said. I mean, the agency model's tough. I mean, I worked for probably half my career was, you know, with when they were integrated together, and you know, the good old days when the media department was a department within the creative agency. And you know, to be honest, I mean, they separated not because of, you know, business reasons. They separated because the good old days weren't that good. I mean, you know, media was
Don Draper seemed like he was having a good time. I mean,
well, no, but I mean, media was like an accounting function. It was, I mean, in a lot of agencies, it was, you know, the integration doesn't happen because they're physically located in, you know, forgive me if I'm like, you know, butting up against a big, you know, well, especially you guys were one of the first independents. You know, integration doesn't happen by, you know, people owning it. By people owning each other. You know, it happens by a culture of kind of working together. And I think that we have to, you know, the whole industry, agencies, clients, it's tough. The agency side's, you know, it's a difficult model today because poor clients like us are, you know, squeezing you guys. And if you listen to Martin Sorrell talk, he'll talk about the evil clients who are, you know, not paying them what they have to. But I think it's going to be, we just have to figure out how to collaborate. And again, much of what you said, it's not going to happen this year. I mean, it's you know, it's a snail's pace. It's not going to happen overnight.
Eric?
I think from a Nielsen point of view and a measurement point of view, we need to finish the job on total audience measurement and then move very quickly to target audience measurement. And I would say that that's one of the reasons that we're looking downfield. We've made some pretty big investments in the area of planning. So we actually just last year launched a new product called Nielsen Media Impact, which is a cross-media audience-based planning product. That allows you to understand your audiences and plan against reach, frequency, and impact metrics across all those different media. So that's something that we've put major dollars into, and we're bringing out to the agencies and our clients now, so that they can get started on the, you know, understanding the world of audiences, and then we need to finish the job in terms of measurement.
Great. Kern, just to close us out.
Quickly for Viacom, I think, you know, we've built a business around really deep connection with unique audiences. And that all started with sort of a culture of audience intimacy and understanding. And that's getting factored out this year and beyond in a few areas of investment. One is the integrated marketing and creative that builds out our audience insights and takes them into the world of activation. 2 is targeting and richer attribution that helps us understand who saw the ad, how did they react to it. And the 3rd is some of this cross-platform stuff that helps us take that messaging and take that intimacy and move it into social platforms, move it into digital platforms, and support the kinds of buys that these folks want to make.
Great. Ben, Kern, Doug, Eric, I want to thank you. I want to thank all of you for your attention. All good.